You have to start by asking a question. Real knowing starts with questioning.
You do have to like to read, and you have to like to talk. You can hate everything else, but if you like to read and like to talk, then this is the place.
I don't ever feel like I've just read the answer in a book or had my tutor tell it to me. I always feel like my classmates and I have figured out together.
We study great books, which means the texts that are foundational to our civilization in every area that you can think of.
We don't use textbooks and we don't have lectures. We only use primary sources and all classes are discussion-based. So instead of reading a textbook telling us what Plato thinks and what Aristotle thinks, we are actually reading Plato and Aristotle and figuring out for ourselves what they think.
It's a unique place in that we don't believe in departments. We don't think the human mind has departments. So a lot of students just find new areas of themselves because they're forced to stretch.
Every class relates to the next. It's such a unique curriculum. Nowhere else do you get to read all these incredible books and get to talk about them and explore them in this way.
Classes at St. John's are 15 to 20 people. They're led by either one or two tutors, with what we call our professors, to kind of level the playing field.
In class, we're all equal. We use last names, we use Mr. and Miss. This tends to make the classroom a very democratic place.
Outside classes, St. John's tutors are just everywhere. You meet them in hallways, you talk to them at lunchtime in the coffee shop.
We go to lunch with students. We meet them for coffee. We study books with them outside of the material of the classroom. We are parts of their lives. They're parts of our lives.
So you really have every opportunity to get to know your tutors. They're really invested in students' educations at St. John's. It's not just about what grade they give you. They want to see you succeed. And I think that that's a really unique relationship that not a lot of colleges have.
Sometimes you come into class and the students have been there for 15 minutes already talking about something because they're so excited to get started.
After class, you go to the dining hall and people will still be talking Plato. You go to the gym and you find in between fencing bouts, they're talking Hamlet. That's very normal for this place.
What do you do with a St. John's degree? And more broadly, what do you do with a liberal arts education? Our graduates go on to do a full panoply of postgraduate education and careers.
I am prepared for politics, for business, and for relationships, and above all, I'm prepared for happiness, basically.
This school makes you stronger, it makes you braver, it makes you more capable and more confident in your intellectual abilities and your communication skills.
I think it can really rock your world. It can really make things turn upside down in a wonderful way, but if you're taking it seriously in a hard way, it's making you rethink your life.
You're never going to find anything like this anywhere else. Nothing has what St. John's has, so if it's at all interesting to a student, I recommend that that student come.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to St. John's College virtual admitted student event. We are so excited that you have decided to join us today. We have a lot of great information for you over the next couple of hours. You're going to hear from some of our dynamic students, our staff, and our faculty, which we call tutors here at St. John's. You're going to see a little demonstration of what we do in the classroom. You're going to hear about student life. You're going to hear about alumni success stories. And we are just so glad that you are able to join us to experience a little bit of St. John's and get a taste of what we can offer you this fall. The program, the link that you use to get into this is going to be your program for the entire event. So if you happen to get kicked out accidentally or you lose connection, go back to that page and jump right back in. And we'll have some different links for some of the portions later that you'll go to after we end this first portion of our webinar. So just always refer back to that program if you have questions. And I'm going to get this turned over and started with our Vice President for Enrollment, Mr. Ben Baum.
Thank you, Caroline, and welcome to the St. John's College Virtual Admitted Students Day, everyone. My name is Ben Baum. I'm the Vice President of Enrollment at St. John's, and I speak for the whole admissions team when I say we are so proud to have as admitted Johnnies to the class of 2026, all about 175 of you right now. And so there's a big group here. And I want to start just by saying something that I probably shouldn't say as we launch a virtual event, but I'll say it anyways. And that is that I know many of us are very tired of Zoom. I know many of you, in fact, are very tired of Zoom because you wrote about that in your applications. And that is one of the reasons why we're trying to keep the program relatively short today. It's just going to be a little over 2 hours. And in that time, as Caroline said, you're going to meet current students, faculty, alumni, staff at the college. You'll actually meet the presidents of the college, and you'll meet fellow admitted students and families too. The problem, though, is that 2 hours really isn't enough time to fully understand what St. John's is all about. And so in that way, this virtual admitted students day is just the start. If you go back to the schedule for the day and you scroll to the bottom of the page, you should see a calendar of upcoming events. And there are dozens of them coming up, but I'll highlight one in particular. And that is on April 2nd, we're having our on-campus admitted student days in Annapolis and in Santa Fe. And we'd love to see you in person on those days. Registration is live now. There are other options, though. If April 2nd doesn't work for you, you can plan to visit campus nearly every day between now and April 1st. Or in fact, beyond that to May 1st. We also have virtual events, student panels, alumni panels, book clubs. We're going to have a presidential Q&A with President Roosevelt in Santa Fe and President Demleitner in Annapolis. And so there's a lot coming, but for the next 2 hours while we have you here, we're going to try to tell you everything about St. John's we can in our limited time. And I'm going to start introducing this college by giving a few of the ways, 4 of them in fact, that I think St. John's just may be the most magical college in America. And so these are my opinions. They don't apply to everyone, but these are my top 4. And the first reason I have on my list is probably the most obvious one, and that is one word, and that word is books. Books are the real reason to come to St. John's. The whole premise of our curriculum is that you're going to read over 200 books across dozens of different subjects, from literature to philosophy, history, math, science, and more. In the next few weeks, in fact, right now, freshmen will be reading Aristotle's Metaphysics, sophomores will be reading Shakespeare's Macbeth, juniors are reading Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, and seniors are exploring the speeches and writings of Abraham Lincoln, Frederick Douglass, and W.B. Du Bois. Students often marvel at the notion of studying math and science through actual books instead of textbooks, but who better to learn geometry from than reading Euclid himself? In our labs, you're going to recreate experiments that led people like Galileo and Copernicus to discover the Earth revolves around the sun. You'll actually read Einstein's own writings. Books permeate all aspects of life for Johnnies. When you walk around campus, you'll find students talking about books in class, in the dining halls, in the dorms, on the sports fields, really everywhere. And I frankly think there's no other college in the world where this happens. After reading about 200 books, every student receives a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Arts at St. John's. That's the degree. We don't have majors, and the books are inherently interdisciplinary. That's the reason why. And just one great example of this would be the copy of Homer's Iliad that we sent all of you as admitted students. It's the first book we read at St. John's. But is the Iliad a piece of literature? Is it history? Is it politics? You might call it psychology. It could be religion or even sociology. The Iliad in the end is impossible to categorize. And I think that's probably true of most of the books we read. If you tried to categorize our degree in conventional terms, the way other colleges might do it, you'd probably say that at St. John's, you'd leave with majors or concentrations in philosophy and politics, the history of math and science, literature, and classics. That's roughly the heart of what we do. Part of my job, alongside the Director of Admissions, Caroline Randall, who you met right at the start of this program, is to read all of your applications. When you applied, we read them all. And in that application, as you know, we ask you to write an essay about books that you love. So in fact, I made a list of the books that all of you in this audience right now actually wrote about in your application. I can't mention them all, but I'm going to mention a bunch of them. And I'm going to start with some of the books that you selected that are actually in the St. John's curriculum, or maybe are kind of other classics we often think of when we talk about classic books. 7 of you wrote about Camus' The Stranger. 2 of you wrote about Brave New World. Many of you wrote about The Count of Monte Cristo. 7 of you wrote about the Bible. 4 of you wrote about Charles Dickens novels. 1 of you wrote about Chekhov's short story, Ward Number 6, which actually caused me to go out and buy Ward Number 6 and read it myself. 1 of you wrote about Emily Dickinson's poetry. Quite a few of you wrote about The Great Gatsby, about Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, To Kill a Mockingbird. The Catcher in the Rye and Pride and Prejudice were 2 of the most popular books you wrote about. One of my personal favorites, 4 of you wrote about East of Eden. 2 of you wrote about Lao Tzu. The Invisible Man. Toni Morrison made several appearances, Virginia Woolf. Some of you, though, chose much more contemporary books. And so 1 of you wrote about Cloud Cuckoo Land. Another 1 of you wrote about Red, White, and Royal Blue. 8 of you, in fact, wrote about a book called The Secret History, which I hadn't heard of before, but is apparently about a group of students at a small liberal arts college studying the classics. And so it seemed particularly appropriate. 1 of you wrote about After Dark by Murakami, The Song of Achilles, Tuesdays with Morrie. 5 of you wrote about The Alchemist. Some of you kind of took a dark theme with your essays, and you chose books like Dante's Inferno. 8 of you, in fact, wrote about George Orwell, either Animal Farm or 1984. 2 of you wrote about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Handmaid's Tale, and a whopping 10 of you, in fact, wrote about Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I don't know what that says about you. Nonfiction was one popular theme of these books. The Autobiography of Malcolm X, The Diary of Anne Frank, Stephen Hawking's A Brief History of Time, Malcolm Gladwell's The Outliers. 1 of you wrote about A Promised Land by Barack Obama, and another of you wrote about The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand. 1 of you wrote about a cookbook, The Banh Mi Handbook, so I could learn more about Vietnamese cooking. There was quite a theme around people choosing books that were important to you in childhood. And so 4 of you wrote about The Little Prince. 2 of you wrote about The Tao of Pooh, as in Winnie the Pooh. The Boy Scout Handbook made an appearance, so did Charlotte's Web. Always, when I look at these lists, some of the most popular books you choose are sci-fi books. And so Eragon was written about by 8 people. C.S. Lewis had 4 people write about it. Dune, 5 people. But there were 2 clear-cut winners in the end. The runner-up for the most number of references for any of you was William Shakespeare, with 12 people writing about a number of different plays from Macbeth, Hamlet, and The Tempest. But the number 1 author who anyone wrote about, and this has been true for the last several years running, was J.R.R. Tolkien, writing about Lord of the Rings. So there you have it. That's actually many of you in this audience listening right now. These are the books that you wrote about. I can't tell you how many students come to St. John's and they tell me that they finally found their people. And I think what they often mean is that in high school, not everyone loves books the way we do at St. John's. They're not as excited to write about the books that you just heard me mention that were in all of your essays. And yet here at St. John's, that's what we're all about. That's what we love. And students often find their home here. Finding other students who love books the way they do. So that was my number 1 reason for why St. John's is truly magical, books. But my number 2 reason is just as important. My number 2 reason is seminar. Seminar is the heart of what St. John's is all about. And it's unlike anything you've ever seen. St. John's has the smallest student to faculty ratio really of any college in the country. It's 7 to 1. And so our classes are small. In the classroom, we don't call our faculty professors. As Caroline mentioned, our faculty don't give lectures. Instead, we call them tutors because they're really there to guide a discussion amongst the students. And so as a result, every single class at St. John's begins with the tutor asking an opening question that's going to trigger discussion. And here are some examples of what those opening questions are like. In one class, you might have a tutor say, "What makes a person noble?" In another class, the question might be, "What is love?" In still another, it could be, "What does it mean to be free?" And the magic of seminar is the discussion that happens around these questions. And frankly, I think how excited our students are to talk about these ideas. And that could be the idea of guilt in Macbeth, or the idea of beauty in Aristotle, or maybe it's love in Pride and Prejudice, or it's the concept of freedom in the writings of Frederick Douglass. No one in the classroom is in a back row. You are gathered around a round table having this discussion where every voice is heard. And the energy I find in seminar is really palpable. And so my number one reason for St. John was books, but my number two reason is really about what we do with those books. We discuss them in seminar. My number three reason has to be the people. And these are the students who make up our smart, supportive, warm, and quirky community. And I'm going to give you some examples of this. On our Annapolis campus, there is one sport where St. John's is the national collegiate champion. And that sport is an unusual one. It is croquet. Anyone can play. In fact, over half of our students play intramural sports. You might be a great athlete, you might be a terrible athlete, but we play for fun, and so everyone is welcome. And each year we compete against the United States Naval Academy in a croquet match where thousands of people come to campus to watch. Our students actually learn to waltz so that they can dance on the quad to a live band during the croquet match. St. John's is the third oldest college in America, and some of our traditions sound like they go back to our founding in 1696. Another example, on our Santa Fe campus, you live in one of the greatest art cities in the world. Santa Fe is famous for art, Native American art, Latin art, film studies, the Santa Fe Opera House. The Collegium event on our campus each year features Johnny's performing everything from hip hop to Baroque music. And the whole community comes together to cheer each other on at Collegium. These are just two examples. But when you come to St. John's, you're joining a freshman class of only 100 to 150 freshmen on each campus. And you live on campus, you eat in the dining halls, you're going to join dozens of student clubs, and everyone knows each other and genuinely cares about each other. I also think there's another dimension to this, and that it's that Johnnies are extraordinarily diverse. We love books, we love ideas, but right now I can tell you that our admitted students come from 48 states plus DC and Puerto Rico. We have admitted students from 36 countries, many of whom are on this call right now. On this Zoom, I know we have people as far flung as Maine, California, Florida. We have people calling from Romania, from China and Ghana. 35% of our admitted students identify as students of color. 14% would be the first in your families to graduate college. Our students identify with different races, ethnicities, sexual orientations, gender identities, religious beliefs, political philosophies, and really much more than just that. And this diversity is in many ways possible because we work to make St. John's affordable for all students, no matter what your background is. And this has been going on for a long time, but I want to just bring you back for a moment to 2019 when we started our Current Capital campaign, where we've been raising quite a bit of money. And we've been in the news a lot because, in fact, St. John's has raised just about $300 million in the last 3 years. That is a lot of money for any college. But I think what really matters is actually how St. John's has chosen to spend that money. And that is on scholarships. It's on making this college affordable. So since 2019, we've actually lowered our tuition and we've increased our financial aid. And if you or your families have any questions about financial aid, I really want to encourage you to talk with us. Like I said, if you go back to the schedule for Virtual Admitted Students Day, there's a lot of resources on that page. But if you scroll to the bottom, one thing you'll find there is the ability to sign up for a one-on-one conversation with your admissions counselor. And if you have questions about financial aid, we'd love to chat with you about that. So that was number 3 on my list, books, seminar, and now the communities that we have in Annapolis and Santa Fe. And I want you to keep in mind that you get both, that all of our students are free to spend time on both campuses if they choose. The last item I wanted to mention, though, on my list of reasons why St. John's is truly magical, number 4, I want to mention our alumni. You're going to meet some impressive alumni in this program and after this program. And one thing you're going to note when you meet them is that St. John's seems to transform students to do amazingly diverse things. Francis Scott Key, the writer of the American National Anthem, went to St. John's in 1796. Ahmed Ertegun, the founder of Atlantic Records, went to St. John's. Warren Winiarski, the creator of the most important winery in Napa Valley. Lydia Polgreen, the last editor-in-chief of the Huffington Post. Ben Sasse, United States Senator from Nebraska. We have lawyers and doctors and journalists and teachers and entrepreneurs. Over 50% of Johnnies do internships while they're here on campus, and we have special funding to pay students to pursue these internships. It doesn't hurt that our campuses are in remarkably good locations for internships. So Annapolis and Santa Fe are both state capitals. Annapolis is also just outside of Washington, D.C., and Santa Fe is down the road from Los Alamos Laboratories and the Santa Fe Opera House. And like I said, at the bottom of today's schedule for this virtual Admitted Students Day, you're going to find a link where you can find hundreds of profiles of alumni in all different career fields, and that might be something you want to explore. So those are my 4 reasons I wanted to mention: books, seminar, community, and alumni. And I would say St. John's is pretty magical, but I also don't think you have to take my word for it. In your application essays, we asked an optional question where you could write to us about why you were applying, why you liked St. John's. And so I went through your applications and I selected a few quotes for things that you actually said. So these come straight from your peers. And here are a few of these quotes. One of you said, St. John's is completely unique because the students are taught not what to think, but how to think. Another one of you said, the overwhelming sense of community, whether it be through the lively class discussions, exciting intramurals, or simple conversations, it's palpable. Quote, I am insanely curious about everything. At St. John's, I can explore everything. One of you said, at St. John's, I've met many different students from completely different backgrounds than mine. I find the variation of people to be inspiring. I am excited to be surrounded by peers who share my passion for learning. And the last one I wrote down was this, probably the sweetest of them all. It was as if someone had built a college around a daydream of mine. I didn't think it was possible. If by the end of this program you feel about St. John's the way any of these students I just quoted do, then it's time to join us. We'd love to have you become a Johnny. And so you can go back to the schedule for Virtual Admitted Students Day, and we have links on there for where you can sign up, where you can make your enrollment deposit, and you can join us. But with that, you are done listening to me lecture at you. That's not what St. John's is all about. I'm done talking, and I want to thank you for being here today. Instead of talking with me, I want you to actually talk more with other members of our community, students, tutors, and each other. I just want to encourage you to stay to the end of the program because at 2:30 Eastern and at 12:30 Mountain, you're actually going to have a chance to meet the presidents of St. John's. They're going to join the conversation. But right now, I would like to introduce one member of the St. John's College faculty, and that is Masora Shukla. And she's going to join us to talk more about the Great Books curriculum, and she's also going to be joined by some current students as well. So welcome, Masora. Welcome, Ms. Shukla. Come join me.
Thank you, Ben. Can everybody hear me okay? Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us today. I'm Masora Shukla, and I've been a tutor at St. John's, Santa Fe since 2012. Before that, I was at the University of Chicago, where I received a doctorate in religious studies. I'm also a graduate of St. John's Annapolis, so it's as somebody with experience both as a student and a faculty member of the St. John's classroom that I'm talking to you today. And I want to try and get at the unique and rich character of the St. John's classroom experience. One great place to start is with the physical setup of every St. John's class. Imagine, if you will, a room with a large, polished wooden table at its center and wooden and wicker chairs all around it. You come in, you pick your seat, you sit down, and you put your book on the table. Other students come in and do the same, as does the tutor. In a few minutes, you're all sitting around the table facing each other with your books ready to open. This is how every St. John's classroom looks and how every St. John's class starts, whether it will be focusing on Baudelaire's poetry, Aristotle's metaphysics, or Newton's calculus. And this is because conversation is the center and the heart of St. John's education. This is why St. John's students face each other rather than facing a lecturer at a podium. This is why they don't raise their hands and wait to be called on, but instead talk to each other naturally when a thought occurs to them. All of this is because we firmly believe that the best way to truly learn is to develop your understanding of a shared text with others in conversation. It's in conversation with your classmates and your tutor that you will express, test, nuance, and often radically change your thinking. It is through this process of conversation that your learning really becomes your own. And the strange thing is, this learning becomes your own precisely because it's a shared process. St. John's is really a community built around conversation, built in a way by and for the activity of talking together about a shared body of texts. As a community built by and for conversation, St. John's has certain features that I want to highlight and try briefly to unpack. Tutors, as you've heard a couple of times, tutors do not give lectures. We ask opening questions to begin the conversation, and then we guide the conversation as the students work with the text and each other's interpretations. Under our guidance, because we're more experienced readers and thinkers and have greater familiarity with the material, the students are able to work together to forge an understanding of the material at hand. And the understanding is really theirs. It's their work. We use honorifics and last names. You've heard this. This practice serves several purposes, I think. First, or at least two. First, it creates a kind of parity between students and tutors. We want the authority around the table to be the authority of good reasons and good reading, not of higher degrees. So I'm a doctor, but in the classroom, I am Ms. Shukla. And we want to learn from each other freely. We don't want to be encumbered by sort of extraneous structures when we're trying to learn. But of course, I'm sure some of you have had this thought, calling each other by our first names would achieve this parity. So why honorifics and last names? Because this isn't the ordinary conversation you may have in the supermarket checkout line or in the break room at work. This is the kind of conversation in which you puzzle over Kant's Critique of Pure Reason for 2 hours. This is serious. So we set it apart, we make it formal to remind ourselves that we're bringing our very best self, our most generous, most thoughtful, most serious self to the table. And then the final thing I want to highlight is that we have a 4-year all-required curriculum, as you have heard again. And it encompasses philosophy since Plato, literature since Homer, the development of modern mathematics and sciences from the ancients. It's completely interdisciplinary. It also includes learning ancient Greek and modern French. So the scope of the curriculum doesn't allow for majors. Rather, all St. John's students share the set of specific classes and texts that make up the curriculum. But this is what I want to highlight, this is again to strengthen the community of conversation. All the freshmen can talk to each other about what they're studying, as well as being able to talk about it to upperclassmen who have recently been looking at this material. This allows for the formal, serious conversation of the classroom to take on a new and different life outside the classroom, in the dining hall, at the gym, on a hike in the mountains, on a walk by the bay, everywhere. Our students are constantly, this is the way they connect to each other, by talking about these great books. And that's a really unique thing about life at St. John's. So I think I've said enough. I also don't want to lecture you. It just doesn't make sense to be told about the St. John's experience. So what we're trying to do to really bring it to life for you is have you talk to students about it, let them tell you about their experience, but we're also going to have a mini seminar. We're going to talk for about 10 minutes about an Emily Dickinson poem. But first, I'm going to invite the students on to introduce themselves and talk to you a little bit about their own experiences.
Hi, everyone. I am Avarul Chawla. I am from Gurugram, India, and I'm a senior on Santa Fe campus. I'd just like to take a minute to talk about my favorite class on the program. My favorite class on the program is music. As somebody who came from a completely STEM background prior to St. John's, I was very novice in the field. I had no idea what I was doing, and we had no lectures about it. And for that precise reason, I was able to develop a deep sense of appreciation for music in general, but more specifically classical music. And music is all around us. And the ability to be able to listen to music and understand what's going on, what's the chord progression, what's the meaning of it, how it plays with the lyrics, how it plays with the instruments, what's the rhythm, how it works. All of it just plays wonderfully into this life of music. And when you learn music, you start to appreciate every time you hear it. And that just makes your life so much better.
Hi, everybody. My name is Mia Kobilski. I'm originally from York, Pennsylvania, and I'm a current junior on the Annapolis campus. My favorite course of study is language. The language tutorial I particularly enjoy because we get to pursue the art of translation, either from Greek or French texts. And I think that reading works in the original languages really illuminates imagery that the author puts forth that you may not see in conventional English as much. And to me, translating is like a puzzle. You're given the text, you work through it, you put the pieces together, and at the end you have this beautiful piece of work that in some way you can call your own. And I just think that's a really beautiful process to undergo.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sayam Dalal. I am from Haryana, India, and I'm a freshman on the Santa Fe campus. So my favorite course of study is definitely seminar. Seminar is, and it's really so difficult to describe it in a short way, in a short, concise way. But seminar is where we discuss as a class the sort of the big list that you see on our website of all of the greatest authors that we read on the program. That's where we encounter the whole text. And the reason why I love seminar is not only are we engaging with authors that have contributed to you know, just the massive human knowledge that we work with today, but also all of these authors are speaking to what it means to live a human life. And that means that the questions that we encounter in seminar are really, really important to even my life. When Aristotle tells me that you know, the greatest pleasure in life is to live a contemplative life, it's to contemplate, I sort of struggle with that. And seminar is an opportunity to read these authors and bring those struggles to your peers and actually have them listen to you. So, you know, my peers would actually engage with what I have thought about this text and possibly offer interpretations or ways of understanding it that might maybe allow for a more charitable understanding of what Aristotle means when he says the best life is the contemplative life. So that's primarily why I love seminar, because we get to talk about some of the most profound and most important questions about our human experience.
Hi, everybody. My name is Avery Lynn. I'm a freshman here on the Santa Fe campus as well, and I'm from Denver, Colorado. My favorite course in the curriculum is the lab course, or the lab program. The reason I like lab is because, you know, I actually came out of high school feeling like, you know, I really love literature. I really want to study literature. That's a big reason why I came to St. John's. And so I came and I didn't expect to fall in love with the lab program as much. But the reason I did is because it explores such a fundamental question, I think right from the start of your freshman year, which is what does it mean to know as a human being? And so one of the first things you do is at least here in Santa Fe, I'm not sure about the Annapolis folks, but we go out into a meadow near our school's campus, and we sit and we observe the meadow. It sounds simple, but Aristotle says that you come to know things through your sight primarily. And so our job is to sit there in the meadow, to draw something and to come back and say, how have I come to know the meadow? And for me, that's a question that I'm still struggling with. So now that we've moved on from, these Aristotle and some of the more classic ways of exploring natural science, how do modern scientists come to know? How is it different from Aristotle, or how is it the same? Can we just sit down and draw a plant and come to know that plant? Or do we need to do experiments? Do we need to find scientific proof? So you step through all these things throughout the 4 years of your St. John's curriculum. And you can do everything from, sitting in the meadow to quantum physics all the way in your senior year. So these kinds of questions, I think, linger for me. What does it mean to know? And as we step through the 4 years of our time here, I think that's something that it's important to keep in mind. So, thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Helen Pillbeck. I come from Frankfurt in Germany, and I'm also a freshman on the Annapolis campus. And my favorite class of the program at the moment is math, the math tutorial, because when I first came to St. John's, math sounded the most jarring to me, like the idea of reading propositions and then demonstrating them in class without any assistance of the book. Sounded a bit scary, but I quickly realized that a math class here at St. John's is very, very different from any high school math that any of us would have encountered in the past, and that it's really about figuring things out together, and it's not about testing you or putting you on the spot or humiliating you at the chalkboard. And it's actually a very wonderful process, and especially recently, in freshman year, we read Euclid's Elements, and we initially we don't talk about numbers at all, and we just talk about shapes and lines and points. But then at one point we start talking about ratios and proportions, and also introduce numbers, and especially the idea of proportions. It's like a theme throughout the whole program. It connects so well to music, intervals, or also lab, measurements, and how all these things work. But in a more abstract way, actually also to music, to language and seminar. So that's what I love about math.
Great. Thank you all. I think we're going to move into the mini seminar portion, if you're all ready. I'm going to read the Dickinson poem, and you should have it as part of the link. Okay. So, further in summer than the birds, pathetic from the grass, a minor nation celebrates its unobtrusive mass. No ordinance be seen, so gradual the grace, a gentle custom it becomes, enlarging loneliness. Antiquist felt it new, when August burning low arise this spectral canticle, repose to typify. Remit as yet no grace, no furrow on the globe, but a druidic difference enhances nature. So I think where I want us to start is trying to understand what Dickinson might mean by druidic difference and how she prepares for that in the stanzas that precede. Why druidic?
Can someone, before we start, can someone define for me their understanding of Druidic? I think that would help me to establish a foundation of where we should go with this.
So what do you associate? But right, it's an adjective. So what?
Yeah, I mean, I think Druidic for me, obviously, I think there are pieces of religious allusion sprinkled throughout this poem. So to say Druidic to me like conjures in my mind this image of, I don't know, some religious figure in robes, very like regal in some way.
Stonehenge, right? So, things like that. Right. Okay. So let's start there. And since we're going the route of sort of association, what then does the word in the first stanza, mass, what do you associate with that? And is there a difference? Have you moved somewhere in the associative links from the first to the final stanza?
It is a very weird word choice to me personally, especially if we take it in conjunction with the adjective that is describing the mass, right? Because like to me, mass is very much like a very formal and like also very important religious activity that is like, how do I say it, like rather grand. But then the word choice of unobtrusive, which makes it like rather meek and small, seems like a weird contradiction. But then together with Druidic, and Druidic has like a more pagan sound to it than mass, right? I feel like that it might just tell us something about like how custom and religion and all these things are like connected to nature, or how it is natural, maybe in a way.
And maybe how it enhances the nature.
Right.
Yeah, so my question for you, Mr. Chawla, is well, and this is for everybody, but what is enhancing nature? So it's talking about the Druidic difference, but what is creating the difference? I get the sense that maybe, I don't know, so there's this theme of summer as well. So we're in summer, further in summer than the birds, and then we have August burning low. And I'd be curious to hear your thoughts about this, but I'm wondering if this is like, you go outside in the summer and everything is extremely verdant green, and you see that there's this like, this glow that she talks about. There's no furrow on the glow of this like very green perceptible change in nature. I'm wondering if summer is the Druidic difference. That's up for debate.
Yeah, maybe to explore that question, maybe we should just start with the first stanza, right? So further in summer, and this gets to Ms. Felbeck's thought about the difference between the weird tension between unobtrusive and mass, and then the difference of mass from Druid or Druidic, right? So further in summer than the birds, pathetic from the grass, a minor nation celebrates its unobtrusive mass. So let's start at a very basic level. What is the minor nation? Let's just start there. The speaker's talking about, she's making a claim about something happening, and it is this weird, as Ms. Felbeck said, right, unobtrusive mass, right? So mass is a ceremony, but it's yeah, go ahead, Mr. Chawla.
So it's weird, but it reminds me of ants in the grass, right? Further in summer than the pathetic from the grass. This minor nation to me seems a lot like ants who have these colonies, the societies, right? And they have this unobtrusive mass that sort of is taking place without the consciousness of anybody else, without the appearance of anybody else.
So yeah, okay. I have a puzzle for you though. If it's so interesting that the speaker in the poem is naming it as an unobtrusive mass. You know, Mr. Lin was just talking about observing the field, right? How does the speaker of the poem know about the mass? Right? Like, what is the form of observation that is being poetically presented here?
Or if I can maybe add on to that question, how exactly is the mass unobtrusive in conjunction with how the observations take place?
I wonder if the observation is somehow like audible rather than visual. Like, I'm thinking of the birds, and they make their tweeting noises, and we can hear them even if we can't see them. And I'm wondering in this case, like, if it is some sort of creature from the grass, like an insect or of the like. If Dickinson can somehow hear it, like a grasshopper noise or a cicada noise, and that's kind of where the observation is coming in. Maybe that's just me thinking about bird noises, but I'm wondering if, yeah, the observation is somehow audible rather than visual here.
Excellent.
Yeah, I think there's something to maybe support that as well, Ms. Kabilski. In the third stanza, when she says, "Arise this spectral canticle," so there's like this kind of song. So yeah, I don't know, because if it's ants, right? I don't know if the ants have a canticle. Perhaps they do in some metaphorical respect, but that makes me wonder. Yeah, I mean, is this an audible observation?
Well, what about Ms. Kabilski's? Am I saying that right, Kabilski?
Yep, you're correct.
What about the thought that it's grasshoppers or cicadas? I mean, I'm taking myself back to a summertime on the East Coast when there are lots of insects in the grass, right? I mean, yeah.
I think insects are probably a safe middle ground to land on, as a nation that is an unobtrusive mass that also makes a sound. And I'm wondering how does the observation or speculation of these insects enlarge loneliness? How is that happening? Because as Mr. Lin pointed out, it's a canticle, right? It's a beautiful hymn, and it's almost a wonderful experience to observe at this unobtrusive mass or be aware of it. So why does it enlarge loneliness?
No, go ahead, Ms. Feldman. No, please go ahead, Ms. Feldman.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but like the spectral canticle, like doesn't that kind of imply something like kind of like spookiness, or that there's like some like, like, I mean, like when I think of like the sounds of birds, for example, unless it's like a scary bird like a vulture or something, I wouldn't necessarily think that the way how they sing their hymns that they are spectral. However, like if we think about like little insects, like crickets like chirping or something, and I don't know, I can very well like imagine that enhancing loneliness in a way. I can't really pinpoint it, but there is something about like these like all of these very small things making like really like basically inaudible sounds, but together creating like this very strong noise that on the one side kind of tells us that we aren't alone, but at the same time also does kind of the opposite. I don't know where to go from there, but like I think it's important to try to consider the adjective that describes the noun.
Yeah, the cricket chirping example was really helpful for me in understanding. And then if we just look at some of the other objectives, pathetic, unobtrusive, gradual, all of this is very low key. right? And in that, it's enlarging this loneliness precisely because it is not not active, sort of in nature, right? And that takes me back to the druidic difference, right? Precisely because it is not active in this way in nature. It's somehow through druidic difference, which we still probably need to work on a little bit more, enhances nature somehow.
So it's really interesting. I'm sort of maybe zooming out a bit rather than focusing on a specific stanza, but it seems to be that there's a gentle custom which enlarges loneliness. And I really like what Ms. Felbeck said about, being aware that you're not alone, but then at the same time, the mass is unobtrusive. So there's a gentle custom that enlarges your loneliness. And yet at the same time, in the last paragraph, this loneliness is not a furrow on the glow. So even though the observation of this unobtrusive masses or even insects in nature is somehow enlarging your loneliness, it's not really a furrow on the glow of nature.
Yeah, I find those first two lines in the final stanza very, very difficult. But I think that is a plausible reading, that somehow the slight spookiness, the slight thought of loneliness is not somehow taking away from the richness that this experience is sort of adding for the speaker. And that's one question I still have. So we've got at the end of the second, third, and final stanza, we have these, so enlarging loneliness, repose to typify. So there's an enlarging that's happening. There's a typification that's happening. Then there's an enhancement that's happening. One question I have is, okay, so who is experiencing that, right? And for me, that again raises this question of, is this a poem about a form of observation? Right? Is it about the experience of observation somehow?
It kind of raises the question, like, if you observe, if you're also necessarily part of something, I think, to me at least, because like, I think like in English you say, oh, I observed a service today. But when you say that, you mean that you actually took part in it. You might, like if you're Christian, you might actually have received the Eucharist, for example. Mm-hmm. So you're actually part of it too. And yeah, on the one side, you observe it and you might feel this like the smallness, but also at the same time like that community. But so in order to observe, you have to be part in a way, because only if you're part, then you can observe like that deeper level of things. Because like if you were just like, I don't know, like kind of on like a balcony or something, looking down on the congregation, and you don't sing, you don't pray, you don't do anything, that type of observation seems very different. And I don't think that that's the type of observation that we're seeing in that poem. I mean, at least that's my inkling. I don't know.
I really like that, Ms. Felbeck. And that makes me wonder that if we're somehow aware of our being a part of something when we're observing it, how then do we also feel lonely? How are those two things happening at the same time?
And is related to that, is enlarging loneliness a bad thing? Does that mean I'm making me feel lonelier and lonelier and lonelier, or does it mean my loneliness takes on some other characteristic or some other valence, right? These each word, of course, there's so few words in this poem. Each word is crucial.
That's a really interesting question, I think, Ms. Shukla. Is enlarging loneliness not enlarging my loneliness, but actually like spreading my loneliness to what is around me. I don't know, that could be an alternative reading. But I don't know, in that way, we are sharing in this kind of loneliness. Seems kind of paradoxical, but I wonder if we don't think about loneliness as something negative, then I wonder if a different meaning becomes apparent there.
On the theme of loneliness, I also want to understand the title. What does it mean to be further in summer than the birds, right? And the reason I say that is it seems like you have left the birds behind in some way, right? And now you are experiencing this loneliness, right? And I know a lot of you probably have not read Waiting for Godot yet, but there's this idea that loneliness in itself is sort of this meditation of nature through its unobtrusive mass, through canticle, that somehow is necessary to enhance the experience of nature or the observation of nature, that you need to be lonely in some way, both physical, spiritual, to have that. But that a lot of it depends on how we kind of read the title and the first line. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm interested in the necessity that was just brought up. I was thinking about what this, we've been having this talk about a change that's kind of being put forth throughout the poem, and if we are leaving the birds behind, let's say, seems like we're moving towards something else, which might be, now that we're further in summer, some sort of fall or winter, looking to what the next season might bring for us. So summer has passed, but we know that something's going to come after it. And I'm thinking of if the loneliness is sort of becoming gradually increased too, there's something about the winter or something in the seasons that's changing that it is in accordance with nature. So it's not technically a bad thing, right? If it's in accordance with nature, but it's something that we must come to terms with, even if we have these sort of lonely or kind of this tension of the change. I'm wondering if that's kind of how we can talk about the leaving the birds behind and the changing gradually of the loneliness as well. It's just an interpretation. I'm not too sold on it yet, though.
Well, it seems to me related to something Ms. Felbeck said earlier about the way in which observation is always interactional. So on one level, the speaker seems to be in some kind of she or he often Dickinson speakers are male, but the observer is hearing something that she can't see and is being affected by it and is being changed by it. And I think that has to do with what you're saying about sort of becoming aware of the cycles in nature and somehow coming to terms with them in an affective way through an observation of nature or something like that. Yeah, because it seems the loneliness being enlarged seems to suggest that it becomes not simply your sense of yourself as alone, but a kind of sense of a shared loneliness that might have something to do with things changing, things leaving, birds leaving, plants dying, right? That somehow that is a form of loneliness, and the observer is coming to terms with it.
Well, when you say that, Ms. Shukla, the first thing I think of is death, right? In a sort of cyclical experience in nature that you share with all parts of nature, is death, and and what Ms. Felbeck said about observing something and recognizing that you're a part of it makes me wonder if this loneliness is somehow you're lonely because you recognize that sort of cyclical death, and you recognize that you too are subject to it somehow, that you're a part of whatever it is you're observing. But that's a lot darker than I initially thought of when I read the poem.
No, and can I just to me, then now I'm remembering the stuff that you guys have said about the spooky spectral canticle and repose to typify, which again, I mean, I don't think this is, and often this is the case with Dickinson's poem. She's hinting at a kind of darkness that haunts life, but that doesn't mean that it's simply a morbid poem, right? So repose, it might be some form of death, but it's also simply stasis and quiet, the kind of quiet where you can actually hear insects, right? That's a certain kind of quiet, but for her, that's haunted by some sort of sense of death, right? And you're further in summer, so you're close to winter and closer to winter. Okay, so now can we say something real quick about the Druidic difference before we open this up to questions from the audience about everything they've heard? Is there anything to?
Mr. Chawla.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was just curious. I'm still very unsure. But I know Mr. Chawla had a connection between loneliness and the Druidic difference, and I wanted to hear more about what you had to say about that.
Well, in a sense, so how have we defined Druidic so far, right? There's this like religious imagery, and there is like people wearing fancy robes, as we've said, something like that. I wonder if to a certain degree, maybe the Druidic difference is kind of an ironic difference, right? This, yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Interesting.
It might also be what Ms. Shukla was saying about there needing to be some sort of quiet in order to actually observe the sounds of the insects. So this observation or is a Druidic difference in some ways, because it's both kind of dark and morbid, because you're sort of reconciling or recognizing an end in the cycles of nature or death, but it's also beautiful because you're not really subject to it right now. You know, when I'm observing the insects at this moment, even though I'm aware of death, at the same time right now I'm not dying. So it's in some ways beautiful to recognize that, and that feels like two different sides of a coin. So it's an enhancement of that observation, which is that you recognize this really potentially lonely end, but at the same time you're not at that end right now. So I'm wondering maybe that's the difference.
We have a suggestion that I'd love all of you to respond to from our audience. Shall I read it? Mr. Wyndham Hughes says, "It seems as if the speaker has stumbled upon a sacred rite of nature while walking alone, the repose of nature, typifying this transcendental experience engaging in nature. It seems to me to be a glorification of the natural over the industrial and mechanical. An ancient tradition, Druidic, supported by canticles. It is the stillness of life. Does anyone else interpret this as a poem is in some way opposed to industry and to machines?" Lovely.
Yeah, I mean, I think that very much stands as a valid interpretation, especially with the first stanza where she writes that, you know, this is a minor nation and it's very gentle, it's very gradual, in contrast to, you know, industry, which is extremely obtrusive, it's extremely loud, right? It's extremely boisterous. So yeah, I think maybe this is a contrast between the ways that industry and nature have an effect on us as human beings.
Mhm. You know, I think we have a very different sort of question, and I think we should speak to it as well. It's not about the poem. The question is, does St. John's have a large queer community? So we're going to be, I guess you all know, we're going to be taking questions on St. John's in general, not just the Emily Dickinson poem.
So yes, in the most short and definite way to answer that, yes, and we have multiple sort of opportunities to celebrate the queer community on campus as well. We recently had a drag ball, which featured a number of drag performances from both members of our community that are queer and are not. And we also have a number of sort of queer support groups that exist on campus. We have a club called Spectrum, which has queer tea every weekend, which is really just an opportunity for the queer community on campus to get together and spill the tea. So yes, we have a pretty big queer community. At least I can speak for the Santa Fe campus.
Okay. Let's see. And we've got someone. Okay, this is about the poem. Do you think Ms. Dickinson was basing Druidic difference off of Julius Caesar's depiction, i.e. basically Druids enhance nature around them? Or do you think she took a relatively modern view of what Druids are? I mean, I can speak to that. Without getting into any sort of historical information about what Dickinson thought and read, it does seem to me that the phrase Druidic difference functions in the poem as some kind of a sign of something not Christian, right? Because you have mass and ordinance and grace. And those are all, that's a Christian vocabulary. And the speaker in the poem seems to be sort of starting there, playing with that, and then going to something recognizably pre-Christian. That is, you don't have to know that much about Druids or that much about history to know that religious tradition and that religious practice predates Christianity and it is kind of a nature religion. I feel like that's sort of common knowledge, and I think that's mostly how it's functioning in the poem.
I think we got a question, which was, how does this poem compare to what you do in class? Was it easier or harder than something you might discuss in class?
Okay. Why don't you guys answer that?
I can take that. I personally don't think there is a comparison on easier and harder in class in general, because the goal of the poem is not to just gain all the essence of the poem and to extract everything you can. It's to encourage a discussion, to explore the poem. And I feel like you can explore any text in any way you like, without any, sorry about the lights, by the way, without any easy or hard question. So I personally think, is it easier or harder? I neither of them, unless you're doing Kant or Aristotle or one of those very, very hard philosophical texts that you cannot go more than one line without reading it 5 times.
I mean, I do think Dickinson is very challenging because she is so, there's so few words and there's so much going on. It's so, but I think Mr. Chawla is right in that the challenges, what the challenges are is sort of a moving target. You know, Kant presents a very different kind of challenge, but there's so much more there to sink your teeth into, you know, so yeah. So we have another question. Are you also studying Dickinson's life and historical context before you tackle the poems? No. So I think that that's a very important thing to bring out about how we do things at St. John's. We would be reading Dickinson along with other examples of modern poetry, and we would be reading this poem alongside other Dickinson poems. So over the course of a section of a class, so a session or two, a few weeks, we would start to become familiar with Dickinson's way of proceeding in poetry, but we are very much about figuring out what we can know about the poem from the poem.
Yeah, I would just like to add something onto that. The preceptorial that I was in was Rimbaud's Illuminations, which is a series of poems written by a very young man, and they're in French. And the thing is, we could say like this person lived during this time period, which happens to be kind of the Industrial Revolution, and we could say, oh, we can see how the Industrial Revolution is put into his poems, but instead what we did is we could read his poems and we could say, this author has this perspective on industrialization. And it kind of allows you to build sort of, what is this author observing in the world around them? What is this author feeling about the world around them and their society, but from their particular perspective? And I think that that's something that's really beautiful, is that we can find out kind of how this author is perceiving the world and what's happening in the world by their writing alone. I think that just speaks in tandem with what Ms. Shukla was saying a moment ago.
There's another question.
Mm-hmm.
I have a passion for books and melodies, but I also want to continue with my computer programming. So my question here is, are there tech-focused classes at St. John's? Simple answer, no. However, I am a programmer myself. I do a lot of machine learning and data science, and will be continuing after St. John's in complex systems and data science research, specifically in computational sociology. That is a lot of tech words, but in short, the gist of my answer is that the programming and all the co-curriculars like that are supported very thoroughly at St. John's by the community and faculty. We have faculty who codes. We have a lab program that encourages you from time to time to come up with your own coding practices. So that'll be my answer.
We also have lots of opportunities for paid internships in the summer, where you can sort of pursue these things that are program adjacent. You become interested in them, or you had an interest before you got here, and you want to develop it in ways that our curriculum doesn't allow for directly. We spend 4 hours a week in seminar. We have two 2-hour seminars. Sorry, I'm realizing not everybody sees the question. So the question is, roughly how many hours per week do Johnnies spend in seminar? And it's the same. Everybody has seminar from, is it 8 to 10 still in Annapolis? 8 to 10 in the evening on Monday and Thursday, and then in Santa Fe it's 7:30 to 9:30 Monday and Thursday, and that is when the entire school is in seminar. So it's 4 hours a week. Now the prep for seminar is another story. It's many hours. I would say. Well, what would you all say? How?
I mean, it depends from reading to reading, but I would say at least 3 to 4 hours on an average for one seminar. And that is not including classes and preparation for those classes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Ms. Felbeck, there's a question that you might want to start with. So earlier, Ms. Felbeck said that math, unlike past math at St. John's, isn't to test you. What does the absence of traditional testing at St. John's in general do for you as students?
Yeah, that's a very great question. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know all of your like backgrounds in terms of math, but in Germany, at least, math is very important. Everyone has to do it to like also very like high level of math. However, there's like little done to encourage critical thinking towards the content in a way. So mostly it's like, this is how the pattern works. This is how you have like a generalized equation and you just apply it to all these like different things. And yeah, there's a certain amount of creativity involved because you have like more complex problems that require creativity to solve them, like combining the things that are like facts in the right way, right? So yeah, that's just like in general. And then like the absence of testing in math specifically for me has reduced the pressure in a way to like I still want to understand, but for the sake of understanding, for the sake of being able to talk with my classmates about it and try to figure out things together. And yeah, sometimes it is frustrating that I leave the class and I'm like, I still don't really know what a ratio is. I still don't really know what it means if something is equal. But it is like freeing in a way to not having to figure it out immediately, and also being able to say, okay, I got a tiny step like closer to like a tentative answer. And I like no one is gonna blame me for not being able to give a definite answer. But what I was trying to say more was like that people don't need to be afraid that they are going to like be like that if they're at the chalkboard and they forgot like the next step for the demonstration, that like someone will laugh at them, or that their tutor will like write in their little booklet like, oh, the student was unprepared or something. I mean, maybe some tutors do that, but like my tutors don't, I think. And so it is very much like then the other students join in and they are like, oh, maybe this is the next step, or maybe consider this aspect that we did last time. And then we just figure it out together. And sometimes that are like the best classes, because then people who thought that they had figured it out realized that they actually also had some like difficulties understanding it. And by explaining it to each other, it actually became very clear, or like clearer at least. And I mean, it's kind of not true that we don't have any exams at all. Like we have like an algebra quiz or test to see if we have basic understanding of algebra, but I think it's not graded. So yeah, just that on a side note though, so that you don't think I give you incomplete information.
I'll just add something really short to that. There's a Mark Twain quote, which is, don't let your schooling get in the way of your education. I think St. John's does that really well. Because of the lack of those kinds of tests in math, you know, like, okay, we're getting into a world now where a lot of things are very possible without us having to memorize them, right? So, you know, like a lot of the math we can do now, we can just plug into our computer, plug into a graphing calculator, it'll do it for us. But there's a certain like thinking that's involved with math, right? There's a certain way of thinking, a certain logic that you can't just plug into a computer and be like, oh, I understand how Euclid says that, you know, the side of a hexagon, what's behind Avi right now is, or Mr. Chavla, is the side of a hexagon and the side of a decagon added together form a line cut in mean and extreme ratio. You can't just like prove that using a computer, right? So it's this way of thinking in math that I think is far more important to St. John students. And in that way, I think it makes your education more important than your schooling, so that you're not distracted by, you know, oh my gosh, I got a B- or I got a C on that last test. Instead, you're saying, do I really understand how, what Euclid is saying right now? Do I really understand what's going on? And I think that's far more useful in our modern world today.
Oh, sorry, Ms. Kabilski, were you going to say something? Go ahead.
Mixed-Lal, if you're going to speak on this current question, I would encourage you to go ahead. I was just going to, a question was prompted to me directly. So if you were going to speak on math, you should go ahead before I go.
This is so funny. I was also going to bring up a question that was sent to me directly, but you go first. This one is, yeah, go first.
Okay, thank you. So the question that was directed to me was, let me read it verbatim. So what is the experience of introverts in a discussion-based setting, and how do students who are more introverted manage? And someone knows me quite well. And sorry, that question. So the thing is, I definitely came into St. John's more introverted than I am now. And I'd say the way that I personally managed was simply through the community. And I think Ms. Felbeck spoke to this a moment ago when she talked about going through a proposition together as a class, and kind of the magic that comes out of that. So I think that at St. John's, at least in my experience and the experience of many, is that their peers are just so supportive of the community of learning. And the thing is, going into a class and knowing that you're not going to be judged, and knowing that what you have to say is important, and learning to take up space in the classroom are all things that I think come with knowing that the community around you is just so supportive. And that's kind of how I got over my fears and my apprehensions of being more introverted. And I think also just getting involved with things that are not academic, like intramurals or art classes and things like that, where you can kind of get to know people. And I think that talking to people outside of class, when you go into class, you're like, wow, this is a really safe place for me to express how I feel about the text, and I can share my ideas, and people want to know what I have to say. And I think that that last point, that people want to know what you have to say, is really important. Taking up equal time in class, getting to hear everyone's perspectives are things that are really crucial, I think, to the St. John's program. And keeping that in mind as an introvert, I think might help you if you decide to come to the college.
So there's well, I think we should also answer the question about grades, but just before we do that, there's a question that's equally important, which is, how does St. John's prevent negative attitudes or bullying among students? It is especially important for students from Ukraine and Russia right now. So I think, and anyone else who wants to answer this as well, please feel free to jump on after I'm done. But I think just first off, bullying is not tolerated, just sort of explicitly, like that's not at all tolerated on campus. And in terms of sort of structural support, we have a number of student support staff on campus. So for example, there's Nanette Phillips, who is primarily there to provide support to students, but also St. John's. Now, I don't want to dismiss this as a problem by saying that, oh, everyone at St. John's is, a great thinker and a wonderful person. So obviously we don't have a problem with negative attitudes. I recognize that that's still something that we need to be careful about. And one of the ways that I think St. John's does that is the same way that we handle problems in texts that come up, ideologically speaking. So we have conversations, and we facilitate spaces for students to be able to have those conversations. So with regards to the conflict and the sort of invasion of Ukraine, there was post-seminar. So once seminar is finished, there was a space that was opened in the coffee shop where we had tea and cookies and a kind of comfortable environment set up for really just anyone on campus, students, faculty, staff, to come together in that space and actually talk about how they're feeling given the fact that Ukraine has been invaded, and actually talk out whatever concerns they might be having regarding that. So if there is ever a situation where there's conflict on campus, it is necessarily the case that we sort of appeal to student support which are available in the form of staff on campus and even tutors. But that said, St. John's is, I think, one of the few places where you actually have a group of people that you might be able to talk through these things with. It's never the case that, or at least in my experience, it's never been the case that Johnnies are, there's a sort of conflict that you can't talk through, you know, that has never happened, at least until now. So I'm hoping that that helps as an answer.
And I would just add that because our classrooms are such social spaces, sometimes situations can occur where, as a tutor, it seems to me that a particular person is not being given enough space by another person, and we completely see it as part of our job to take that person aside and say, you know, you are taking up too much space, or your attitude is not respectful enough, and therefore not enough space is being created for this other person to speak, and it must stop. It is a zero tolerance policy for anything like that. But yeah, we should speak a little bit to the grades, the grading question. So the question is, how are students graded for their work? Are there passing or failing grades? I'll just speak first, since I actually grade people. So tutors give students a grade A through F at the end of each semester. So there is a transcript created, and this is for people who need it to go on to grad school, to go on to other things. It is not, I believe this is still the practice. It was when I was a student. It is not released to the student. The student may ask to see it, but it's not actually sent to the student. And the way we evaluate is take into consideration the work at the table, the conversational work, and all of the written work. So there isn't, at the beginning of a course, we don't hand out a syllabus that breaks down the grade in terms of percentages or anything like that. We think of the class as a single thing and evaluate the student on the basis of their performance in the class as a whole. So it's the conversation and the written part all taken together.
I think it's just very important to keep in mind that like spoken feedback in the form of like a DONRAG, which is like this kind of like conference in the end of each term, doesn't equal your transcript. Because I think that was like a misconception that many freshmen had in my case, where people were like, oh, my DONRAG was so positive. Then they checked their transcript and it wasn't bad at all, but it wasn't as positive as the feedback was that they received. And I think that like kind of like discrepancy is simply there because the one thing actually like puts a number or a letter in that case on what is observable, like what the tutor can see, how much the student has improved and how much they have understood. Whereas the DONRAG is like way more personal, way more nuanced. And it's also like actually giving feedback in terms of like how to improve or what to keep up. And in general, I think like most people at the school would probably agree that the DONRAG should be like valued higher by students, because that is what like actually like influences your future as a learner. Whereas that number or like that letter doesn't really tell you much. But of course, like you can't dismiss the fact that transcripts obviously are very important for the future of people. And then I think most tutors are very open to talk to students about how a certain letter grade came about too. And I think that is also encouraged that should be done if one is confused by a certain letter grade.
One time I asked Mr. Pagano, he's one of the faculty here at St. John's, that if like grades are not really important, and they really are not. And this, like, I want to say very strongly that grades are not important at St. John's, right? So I just asked him, hey, grades are not important. Why do you bother giving them at all? And he basically just said, because your grad school requires us to do that. And that is the extent of the importance of grades. Is you're going to need some for grad school. But that is not to say everyone gets an A or everyone gets a C, right? It does matter on your merit a lot and how you perform in class. But the whole idea is that you should not be focusing on the grades, because that can often be discouraging, competitive, or in any way misleading to how you're doing in class and how you should be improving upon it.
I also want to just add in terms of, on what basis then do tutors evaluate us? And it is to do with the amount of effort that you're putting in and the amount of progress you make. So from my understanding, you're not sort of judged like you would be on a sort of test that's there. It's more to do with in class, how do you participate? Are you listening to your peers when they talk? Are you responding to your peers? Are you trying to create that shared collaborative learning space? And also, if, when you started out, you perhaps weren't very good at math demonstrations, how much have you improved? How much work have you put in to actually make a change to, places that were challenging you, or parts of the text that were challenging you? And that's what I really enjoy about our evaluative process, which is that one, you get genuine strategies on how to become a better thinker and a better learner, but also you're not judged according to a sort of ultimate standard. You're judged based on the progress you're making, which is really valuable.
So I think it's actually time for our final question. What do you, the panelists, plan to do with your St. John's education? Go one by one. Shall I call on people? Mr. Lin, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So I'm still very, I'm going to be honest, I'm still very up in the air about what I want to do. I mean, I think, especially for you guys who are high schoolers too, you don't have to know what you want to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I came to this school, and that's a big reason why I chose it, is because it's such a broad range of experience and such a broad range of education that I thought, what a better place to come to dive deeply into things and figure out what I want here. So I'm still figuring that out. It's probably going to be a little bit, but I do have plans for this summer. I have a fascination with language. I've been learning Korean for the past 2 years now. And so I'm going to do language school in South Korea this summer, which is funded by a fellowship that I was awarded by the college. So that will be my summer plans. And we'll see if that turns into a possible Fulbright when I graduate, or if that will take me somewhere else. So that's my current trajectory with my St. John's education.
Ms. Dalal, why don't you go next? I'm just going across my screen. There's.
Well, I completely resonate with Mr. Lin in some ways because, well, we're freshmen, this was kind of a really difficult question. But I will say this, that I know that I'm inclined towards political philosophy as a sort of subject. And so I know that I do want to go to grad school after I graduate from St. John's, just because I would like to study that particular subject further and better myself in it. I will also say this, that given how unsure I am about that, the one temptation that I have throughout my education here is I really, really enjoy this program so much that at moments I find myself wishing that I could just do it over and over again. So maybe I will, if the opportunity presents itself, or if luck would have it, I might, choose to become a tutor here just because I would like to continue doing this program. Yeah, that's my answer.
Ms. Kobilski, why don't you?
So, since I'm a junior, I have to start thinking about it a little more than our freshman friends here, which is scary. But I have applied for the internship grant that the college provides. So I suppose whether or not I get the grant, hopefully I get the grant. I have an internship lined up at House of Ruth in Baltimore, Maryland. And House of Ruth is kind of an organization that helps women and children affected by domestic violence and abuse. And so I'd be working in their legal clinic. And and I'd be assisting lawyers and going to court and things like that to help advocate for these women. And so I do want to pursue a legal career, hence the choice in internship. So hopefully in the future I'll go to law school, but we'll start with the internship and build from there.
Good. Ms. Feldbeck?
So when I graduated high school in Germany, I was planning on going to law school because the German higher education system works differently to the one in the US. So you have like undergrad law school. However, I quickly realized that I wasn't not even 80% sure if I actually wanted to do it. And since that, like, studies of law take like 8 years or more, I was like, I should be sure before I commit these 8 years of my life towards something that I might not actually want to do. However, I still have like that inclination towards legal studies in some way. So therefore, right now, I'm also more in that like exploration phase. So like, for example, this summer, I'm going to work on a farm in Switzerland, which has absolutely nothing to do with law and probably is not going to help me to get an internship in a law firm in the future. However, St. John's really helped me to like kind of be more open-minded to different things. Not that I want to become a farmer necessarily, but like kind of the idea that like you know, fast-moving, fast-paced world that we live in, that like I should be able to like adapt to different things in a way. And I think that like the thinking that St. John's gives me allows, like, or not gives me, but like that thinking, like that it's like instilled here, like helps me to some extent maybe. So therefore, yeah, like right now the plan is still maybe law school in a way. But I'm sure that if I change my mind, that I will hopefully be up to the other things too. I mean, I don't know, but I hope.
And Mr. Chavla?
Yeah, so as a senior, I probably have most concrete plans so far. When I came as a freshman, I was so dead on wanting to be a physicist, specializing in astrophysics. But that didn't happen, and I'm glad that didn't happen because I discovered so many new interests and helped me kind of explore the field of possible options in life. And I don't know why I wanted to do physics. I love physics still, and now my plans most concretely are I have applied to a lot of grad schools. I have gotten acceptances from 2 of them, and I've heard from 2 of them. So I don't know what others decide to do, but I'll choose one of the grad schools I've applied to. My master's is mostly in data science or computational social science. Briefly, computational social science is a field of social science that takes computational methods such as network analysis, machine learning, artificial intelligence to understand some of the important questions of St. John's, like what is it to live well? How do we increase our wealth of a nation, right? So taking my St. John's education of asking very deep, incisive questions about the most pertinent aspects of our life and using computational methods on top of that. So hopefully I'll be doing that in future. And after I hear back from everyone.
Great, thanks.
Thank you all so much. This just, again, reminds me constantly of how much I love St. John's and the purpose and the reason of what we are doing. And the fact that the students every single day completely impress me and completely humble me. Just about the time I think I'm pretty smart, one of you has to go and say something in a completely different direction and realizes I still have so much more to read and to understand. So thank you all so much for being with us today. This was just a small sampling of what to expect in our classes this fall. But as you heard from them, they are going into a lot of different fields, a lot of different directions. And it's unique that this one field will go into so many different areas and that this one major can prepare you for almost anything. So I will go ahead and say goodbye to our wonderful students and tutor. Thank you all again. And I want you all to continue as audience members to continue exploring all of the different possibilities of what we can provide for you with your future careers and your future graduate schools. And so as we're going to take a break here in just a little bit, keep your focus for a few more minutes, but On your program, there's actually a video of some of our very successful alumni. There's links to some of our alumni panels. And so you'll be able to really understand more of what our alumni are doing. We're going to have different alumni panels this spring. We're going to have different ways for you to engage and understand, even from our career services standpoint, of how we are going to get you to that next step. Because you don't just come to St. John's to read, you want to prepare for the rest of your future. I also noticed as we're monitoring the Q&A, over 70 plus questions. You all have a ton of questions, which we love, but we cannot cover all of them today. So we invite you to continue to connect with us at every possible chance. On our website, we actually have opportunities for you to sign up to chat one-on-one with a tutor, chat one-on-one with a current student, meet with your admissions counselor, keep asking questions this whole spring and summer to make sure that you have all of the answers you need to prepare you for St. John's. So before we go into our break, I'm going to invite Malcolm and Robin, two of my favorite staff members at St. John's, on screen, and they're going to give you some introduction to student life and student support on both of our campuses and how we really help you in a lot of different areas. And then we're going to take a short break and we will get you into the next part of our program. So Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you, and there is the wonderful Malcolm as well.
Hi, everybody. So my name is Robin Lancaster. As Caroline introed, I'm a member both of our admissions staff, but also of the student life staff here in Annapolis. And Malcolm and I just wanted to come on a little bit early, one, to give you a bit of a preview before you get to take a break, to make sure that you come to our bit, because we can't quite compete with the students. They're just too good, but I think we have something pretty cool to talk about. So St. John's is in a really unique position in so many different ways, but especially in the fact that we have two campuses 2,500 miles apart, and our students spend time often on both of those campuses. So about 30% of our students will go back and forth between those two campuses at some point in their St. John's College career. And that's actually one of the most unique and wonderful things about being a student here, is if you decide suddenly that you want to seek higher pastures and head out to Santa Fe from the East Coast or vice versa, you can do that and stay in the same program, following the same courses, engaging with the same kind of material, but find yourself a new climate, a new group of people to engage with those questions with. So to that end, we wanted to come on here just a little bit early and to talk to you about the things that you will find in both places, across both campuses. We're going to split up into campus-specific groups, and those of you who've applied to Annapolis should join the Annapolis group. Those of you who've applied to Santa Fe should join the Santa Fe group. But before that, we want to talk a little bit, really briefly, about what it is that you can expect from student services across both. So our students have already spoken to it. I just want to say, so I'm the community facilitator for outdoor education here in Annapolis, and I'll let Malcolm introduce himself in just a second, so I'll keep rolling over. But across the two campuses, one of the things that holds most true is our students don't end up here by accident. They are engaged in this program because they looked at the kind of conversation you just saw our 5 students having there and said, yes, that's it. Sign me up. I want to do that. And so our students don't show up here because of our football team or our great croquet team or the campus architecture that they fell in love with in the movie that they saw that featured St. John's, right? Our students come here because they love this program and they want to do it, and that defines how they relate to our community. And so our community is really closely knit. It's really deeply tied to the academics here. And one of the things that is most important for us about that is providing the kind of support that makes it possible to succeed here. This program is hard. Students are working day in and day out, not just on questions that are difficult from an academic perspective, but they're difficult from a personal perspective. You're asking questions about, am I a good person? What do I have to do to become a good person? Those are not easy questions, personally, professionally, or academically. And so across the two campuses, we provide social services and support, as well as event and programming services to make sure that students can relax when they're able and are able to also engage with all of the difficulties that might come up during the program. So I'm going to hand it off to Malcolm to talk really quick about campus events and student life and mental health support services, and then we're going to let you go to a break for about 10 minutes so you can relax and get some more popcorn.
All right, thank you so much, Robin. So as he said, I'm Malcolm Morgan, Malcolm Morgan Petty now, and I am here. I would like to say sunny Santa Fe, but we're actually receiving snow right now, and there are people heading into the mountains for their morning hike, which was really cool to see earlier today. But as Robin had said, we really focus on the academics here. And even as a student events coordinator, one of the things I make sure that I do is that I support the academic program and that I don't, compete against it. We want to make sure that you're getting a holistic education and that you're complete Johnny while you're here at St. John's. And that goes from, beyond just being in the classroom, but that also means like, how do you eat? Are you a healthy person when it comes to your eating? Are you doing healthy things at the Student Activity Center, that you're working out, that you're actually showing up to like our swing dances, our contra dances, or any of the many events that we have throughout the semester, which, just in the month of February alone, our campus did 52 events between our different departments. So there's always something, and you're always going to find your community. So even if you're an introvert and you don't like to talk as much, you're going to find your people, whether that's over a board game, a cup of tea, or a cup of coffee. We make sure that we support all types of programs for those who like to give energy like myself, and for those who are just like, ooh, calm down, that's draining me. And so we make sure that we just take care of everyone. And that even goes as far as our student support services when it comes to having student life here at the Santa Fe campus. And we have senior residents at both campuses that live on campus to provide additional support for our resident advisors. And we also, we all work together in that aspect. So from nutrition to fitness to mental health. And that's something that I think we should highlight, is that we have mental health services here at St. John's College, and it is a service that's offered to all students. We even have a telehealth type of mental health service that's easy for students to book if you're not able to get a quick appointment in with our on-campus therapist. And our therapists offer in-person sessions when we're not in this craziness of COVID, but there's also the virtual sessions if that happens to be your thing as well. And so we want to make sure that you've got what you need, and we're here to support you. There's RAs in every building if you're just having a little bit of a problem or a crisis of trying to figure out who you are as a person because you just read this book, which happens quite often. And we support that, and we support the questioning and the answering. And we just want to make sure that we provide a community to where you can learn and grow as a person. And that's something that I've grown to see and love to see around here at St. John's College. I'm new to the school myself. I've only been here 3 years. This is my first full year in person. So that's been new and exciting, but I'm looking forward to many more adventures with you all and seeing some of you swap campuses at some point.
Awesome. So with that thrilling preview, we invite you to join us for our respective campus panels. I'll see you in Annapolis. Malcolm, I'll see you out in Santa Fe.
Yes.
And we'll have Caroline rejoin just to give us the final word and let you get on to that break.
Thank you both so much. Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Robin. So coming up, as Robin mentioned, you get a break. We are actually going to end this webinar completely. And that means that you get to stand up and stretch and get some more water and grab a snack and just do whatever you need to do for a few more minutes. And at the top of the hour, I'm not going to even start listing all the different time zones, but at the top of the hour, which will be noon for me, we are going to come back into two different webinar portions. Student life, again, Annapolis or Santa Fe. You get to pick either one. I know some of you are already still kind of considering maybe going back and forth. About 30% of our students go back and forth between campuses at least once during their time. So pick whichever one you want to watch today. I promise we will record the other one and send it out to you so you can still explore both campuses. So you're going to do these the campus specific webinars, and then after that you'll have a chance to actually log into a Zoom meeting where you can actually be on camera and seen and heard, and we will have our admissions staff and some students there to still answer more questions. So I would encourage you to go back to your program, have that flagged or up on your screen so you can get into the next sections of the webinar. And for now, I will say goodbye, and I will see you again at the top of the hour in just about 11 minutes for the next portion of our program. See you soon.